Hey everybody, my name is Steve Soloff with InformTheVoteNJ.com, and today we are joining Brandon Saffold and Carolyn Rush. They are running for State Assembly in Legislative District 1, and for some of you out there, that's the area encompassing Cumberland County, Atlantic County, Salem? Or
No, not Salem.
Salem's LB3?
Cape May, most of Cumberland, and a small part of Atlanta.
Okay, right, yeah.
3 municipalities in Atlanta.
Cool. And just to set the tone for people who don't already know, there's 3 seats in the Democrat primary. I mean, 3 people,
3 candidates.
2 seats.
Correct.
Right, and so the importance of that is definitely one of you two is going to go through, and it's a pretty good chance that both of you will.
Yes.
So, especially for somebody like me who's interested in knowing who you guys are and what you're doing, we're not just talking about the primary, we're very much talking about the general election as well. Cool. So, first and foremost, thank you for showing up. I've been at this process for almost 2 years now, and sometimes it's difficult to get people to correspond, show up, participate, and all that kind of stuff. Some of these people, they live like 5 minutes up the road from me. So,
Definitely.
and I know you live in Princeton.
So I'm back and forth, yeah.
Mhm.
So I go to school in Princeton, and then I'm back and forth between Cape May and Princeton. My residence is Cape May Courthouse.
Cool. And then you're in Seattle.
Seattle City, yes.
Right. So you guys are going out of your way to make time, and so I very much appreciate that.
Our pleasure.
Cool. What else did I want to say about that? Okay, so it's you two, and then there's Carolyn Sabo.
Carol Sabo, yeah, she's from West Cape May.
Thank you for clearing that up, because on the Excel sheet I got from the Cumberland County Clerk's Office, it was Carolyn.
Yeah, they had it wrong.
Right. So I mean, not to nitpick everything or whatever, but
Well, when there's already a Carolyn in the race, it's better to at least distinguish the two of us in some way, so
yeah, exactly. So thanks for clearing that up.
yeah.
And I also want to go a little bit more about what it is what I do and why this is so important. And don't let me ramble on too long. If you have something to say, please interject. It's not about me, it's about you.
Okay.
So again, as I said, 2 years ago, I got one of those sample ballots in the mail, right? And for the average voter like me, who might not know what's going on, you get one of these guys in the mail,
Oh gosh.
right? And it's all the names, right? And so what I did was I started Googling. Like, I'm interested, I want to know more, blah, blah, blah. Couldn't find anything. And it was only like 2 days before the election. So, you know, there's a fair argument to be made, like, I waited until the last minute to try and figure out what was going on. But the only information I was able to get over that weekend was one candidate responded with, I'm working on a website, but it's not done yet.
2 days before the election?
Well, it was the primary.
Okay.
But even still,
Yeah.
primaries matter.
You said it, not me, right? Like, I don't want to be alarmist about everything, but if you
Okay.
share my concern, I appreciate that.
No, it's
Like, for reference, we launched our website November 30th.
Right. And that's the way
It should
Yeah.
basically, I mean, it doesn't have to be November,
Yeah.
you know, whatever,
It
but
should be some sort of timeline so people can look up the candidate
right.
and see what they stand for.
Exactly. So again, I appreciate you guys having the website and then giving me some sort of baseline to go off of and all that kind of stuff. So that election came, and I basically wound up voting blind, right, in the primary. And it's like, that's just not really appropriate. I'm around. I got time. Let me keep looking. Looked up all the phone numbers, emails, contacted local newspaper, which basically you could reasonably argue it doesn't exist anymore. And finally I got a hold of my Mayor Finucci, and he hooked me up. He was like, oh, okay, here's how you can get in touch with the Republicans, here's how you can get in touch with the Democrats or whatever. But even with all of that, it's still been about 2 years. I still feel like I only half know what's going on, right? So, again, thank you for showing up, doing all this. Oh, another point I wanted to make. that meet and greet we were at the other day,
Mm-hmm.
the only reason why I knew that happened is because my friend from high school, who I barely talk to anymore, posted it on her Facebook. And I'm like, I wish I could have just went on the Cumberland and J. Dems website and just seen that. You know what I mean? Because that's like a place that I know I can regularly check.
Mm-hmm.
But to have it randomly be posted on Facebook, it's like, I want to try and close that gap.
Right.
And I'm sure you guys do too.
Right.
Because you want to get your message out.
It would have been nice if there were even more people at that meet and greet.
Exactly. So that's part of the idea of what we're doing here. To try and close that gap.
It's a win-win.
Exactly. So what we're going to do is give you a little opportunity to just introduce yourselves, because as far as I know, I don't know, are there videos out there with you guys basically just introducing yourself, getting an idea of your personality and all that kind of stuff?
This is the first one.
Yeah.
We're working on stuff now. We're going to start releasing issue-based videos and introductory videos.
Perfect.
Now that we're on the ballot and we're in the full swing of campaign season.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Why don't we just do it super casual at first? Either one of you can go first. Like, just briefly explain your background and why you're in this race particularly, what you're hoping to accomplish, whatever.
Okay, my name's Brandon Saffold. A little bit about my background. I'm from Cape May County. I grew up, I'm third generation. My great-grandparents came here from Italy. My mom grew up in Wildwood. I went to Lower Cape May Regional High School, so I'm hyper-local. I really care about my community. At the age of 17, I rose my right hand and I swore on the Constitution to defend our democracy, and I joined the United States Coast Guard.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you. It was a moment. I'm proud to be a veteran and to be a voice for our veteran community down here, because as I know, I'm the only veteran candidate in our district.
I believe so. Yeah, you're, as far as I know, you're the only person that's directly stated it, so I would assume
Yeah.
the same.
And when I went into the Coast Guard, you don't really know what job you want to do. You go to basic training. I was enlisted, and I had the opportunity to, after training, to go to a land unit or to go to a boat. And I said, I want to do the mission. I want to get involved in the missions of the Coast Guard. So I opted to go to a cutter, which is a lot of work. Like, all of those people there who have served on ships or out at sea right now, I have a lot of respect for you, because you're gone for months at a time on deployment in the middle of the ocean.
I worked on a cruise ship for a while too, so
so
I
you
know
get
what it's
it.
like to be on the ship for it kind of drove me nuts, so I know what you're talking about.
So I have experience. Our main missions were basically 3 or 4. So like drug interdictions, migrant interdictions, hurricane relief, search and rescue. Big on the hurricane and the drugs. The ship I was on, we took, I think, $150 billion worth of cocaine off of the ocean, like from transit that was going to come into the United States. Not just cocaine, heroin. In the 2 years I was there, it was huge. So I'm glad when I served, I was a part of the core missions of the Coast Guard. So I have an understanding of, the migrant problem and, people trying to come to our country, or like the processes with like asylum seekers. So I have a lot of experience with that. When I speak about it, it's not just my opinion, it's real life. It's me as a former Coast Guardsman that was actively in the mission. So I bring that to the table. Another thing about me is when I got out of the Coast Guard, I was studying biomedical science, and I wanted to come back to New Jersey because where I was from, and I transferred. I became Princeton University's first Coast Guard veteran transfer student, which is huge.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I helped Princeton become the first Ivy to have like every branch of the military.
Right.
So, and I never, growing up here, I was never really good at school, so it's really huge to me because I worked really hard to get where I am now, and I'm bringing that same energy to this race. I will work just as hard for the people in my community as I worked to build myself from a student who barely graduated from Lower Cape May Regional High School now to the #1 institution in the country.
Right.
So that's like part of my background, and then I guess we'll get into the issues a little bit later.
Yeah, sure.
I'll hand the mic over to Carolyn and let her talk about her background.
Thank you. So, as you mentioned, my name is Carolyn Rush, and I live in Sea Isle City, so I'm from Cape May County. I look forward to serving both Cape May, Cumberland, and part of Atlantic. I am the proud mother of 5 grown children, and I have 7 grandchildren. My background is in engineering with a degree in computer science. I set forth on a 35-year career in engineering that encompassed software engineering, systems engineering, and engineering management.
I'm glad you mentioned that, 'cause I dabbled in software engineering for a while. I thought of a couple of analogies that,
Okay.
a little jargon inside.
Okay, we'll get to that.
Maybe that'll come up.
Yeah, well, I started doing COBOL programming.
Wow.
So we're going way back.
Yeah,
Systems that are still in use, though, from what I understand, in our government systems.
I heard the same.
They're talking about redoing the COBOL system that runs the Social Security office, I think.
Right.
Maybe I can get a job
Maybe.
there. Who knows? But anyway, so I worked for a while in the intelligent transportation industry. I was with the company that did the initial design, implementation, installation, and integration of EasyPass. So that was an exciting job, a lot of new technology being implemented in the roadways and stuff. So I did that for about 10 years, and then I moved on to Lockheed Martin. So I moved into the defense industry. And while I was with Lockheed, I was working on large-scale systems. Our customer was basically the Navy, and then we were starting to move into Coast Guard systems. But what we did was put together the system that protected the enlisted folks on the out serving on the ships. So when you said you went on a cruise, we had cruisers and destroyers, very different than the cruise you were on. But basically,
that's not playing your guitar in the theater.
No, it's not that.
different.
So the Aegis ships were always considered the shield of the Navy. So they protect the fleet. So I always felt good about the fact that I was using my expertise in systems engineering to protect the people that were there, protecting our freedoms. So that was always a good thing. But as my children grew older and started leaving the house, I found myself thinking that I wanted to do more, that I didn't want to continue doing engineering, although I loved it. I wanted to see if I could make a difference in people's lives in a different way. So I retired from my job and decided to seek elected office. So I am now pursuing a seat in the General Assembly here in New Jersey. Main reason I decided to run for this is because I'm concerned about all the changes taking place at the federal level and how they might ripple down to the state level. I want to make sure that we pass legislation that will keep the people, not only in our district, but in our whole state, safe and continuing to receive the services that they deserve to receive. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, no, that sounds perfectly reasonable to me. So, yeah, I'm very much like, let's get into the substance,
Okay.
the issues, and all that kind of stuff. And so, what my strategy here is going to be is like, I saw the stuff that you guys listed on the website, and so we can do that. And then there's some other stuff that either was not fully addressed, or it's just, there's 1,000 things in politics that anybody could make a part of their platform or whatever. So other things that I was thinking about that maybe I didn't see on the website.
Okay.
So the first one was the veterans stuff.
Oh yeah.
You guys want to start with that?
Yeah. So a couple of the big things.
Just so I can help direct it.
Okay.
You guys listed safe staffing.
Yes.
So in my mind, when I'm an average voter and I see that, I'm like, what is that?
Okay.
I can Google it myself, and I'm the nerd who's like, but to help set the stage for the listeners.
Well, let me tell you what it means for me.
Sure.
So as a veteran and someone who has gotten out of the military, I understand the mental burden it is to go from that mindset and really reintegrate back into society. you're conditioned a certain way, think a certain way, act a certain way. You're no longer a civilian. And then to transition back, it's very hard for a lot of us. And, when you transition, a big part of the transition is mental health care.
Sure.
Personally, I have had to go utilize the VA for, psychologists and just to help me transition back into life. And there was a point where my psychologist had left the VA clinic, and we're not even talking down here. I was in Orange, New Jersey. We were doing Zoom. And she left, and they said, okay, we don't have a psychologist right now. We're going to put you on a wait list. 3 months went by. 6 months went by. Like, oh my gosh. I have fellow service members that have, who are rest in peace to them, who are no longer here anymore because they didn't have access to things like this that we need access for. We need to up our staffing in VA clinics, and we need to make sure positions are filled. Or when a psychologist or a professional that's hard to find is going to leave, we need to ensure we have incentives for those people to either stay or to bring new people in.
Right. So just if I can try to make a connection, there are bills like S2700 or A3683 that are already introduced in this year's legislature. And my general understanding, it's about the ratios. Like, you want to make sure there's enough nurses. Right.
Yes, exactly.
And so would your general standpoint be something along the lines of you agree with the current legislation and you would continue to support it, or is there something about it that's not quite what it should be? Or
okay, I haven't seen that yet, so I'm not going to fully agree with it, but if there are things in there that create staffing ratios that would help my community, I would fully support it.
It does, the way I read it, it does generally seem to concur with what you're saying.
Yeah, so whether we progress that or we look at it again and rewrite it, make it better, and have people on that committee that are actual veterans and understand these things better and listen to the experts, we could probably make it better. Who knows? But any initiative that's going to help our veteran community, I fully support.
Yeah, cool. Did you want to add?
No, I have not read the pieces of legislation that you referenced, but I know in general, patient to staff ratio is a big deal, not only in the veteran community, but in care in general. Yeah, healthcare in general, especially with the elderly. I know that a lot of times the staff feels that they're caring for too many patients to give good care to each of them. So if that legislation helps to, solve that problem, then I would certainly support it.
Yeah, it seems like there's a general bipartisan support for that. I know one bill might be supported by more Democrats than Republicans and vice versa for another.
Yeah.
But it seems like something that hopefully in this politically charged climate we can find a lot of common ground.
Yeah,
just help people who are in need.
And I would be willing to work bipartisanly on anything that's going to help our community. And to go back to that, I have a little more experience. So when I was pre-med, I volunteered at a level 2 trauma center in Florida. And I know the games these I don't want to call them hospitals, these businesses run. Yeah. I was volunteer. There was supposed to be like 6 to 8 techs on the floor. There were 2. Unfortunately, patients wouldn't get the adequate care that they needed. And at a point when I was pre-med, I was highly qualified to be a PCT. I was ACLS certified. I was a great volunteer, one of their best. And I applied. I made it through the application process. They turned me down. And they were short-staffed.
Yeah,
they were suppressing their staffing levels to make profit. I will end that in the state of New Jersey.
That's where the general capitalist thing can be abused.
Right.
Right. It's always a bottom line as opposed to actually quality of care. As my parents are pediatricians, or they were, and so I've heard similar stories my whole life. So hopefully that can get rectified. Let's see. How about let's switch over to the county line thing, because I know at least you were very big on that, but I don't know how involved he was.
Brandon wasn't necessarily involved in the case, but he's always been a supporter of abolishing the county line. So
Can we just explain it for people who don't really know?
So the county line is
Have the sample ballot? That, I'm pretty sure that was the county line system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I was
Okay.
thinking about that. It might be. Why don't you look to see?
Okay, this is...
yeah, it is. This is a line.
Okay, so the people can't really see that. It's a vertical listing of all the Republican candidates that were endorsed by the county chair. Is that the concept?
By the county organization.
Yes.
Right.
So here we're looking at the Cumberland County organization. So what happens is in each. Now, what I'm about to describe is a ballot style that was unique to the state of New Jersey. No other state in the country has the county line system. And what it is, each office, the county picks their favorite candidate for that office. And if you look on the ballot, you have the office is listed in this column, and then the county's favored person candidate is listed next to it. So each office has a preferred candidate, and they're organized in a line. So this line represents everybody that the county thinks is the best candidate.
And when you say the county, specifically, to be more specific, we're talking about, each county has a Democratic organization and a Republican organization. This is the primary ballot. So in June, you vote for your favorite Democrat or your favorite Republican. Well, these organizations, oftentimes every county did things differently, where sometimes it was a small committee of people who would choose the endorsed candidate, very biased. Sometimes it would be solely the county chair, so the Democratic county chair or the Republican county chair. So sometimes it was one person or a very small group of people saying, oh, this is our candidate.
Sure.
We're going to put them here, front row, in the line.
So what ends up happening, if you're not the person that the county committee has selected, your name gets put in a different column, and quite often you're in a column by yourself because you haven't compiled a list of people to run with you. So in this example that we've been showing you, column A are all of the county's favorites, but in column B, C, and D, you see other people that are running, but because they were not selected by the county, they appear by themselves in a column off to the right. A lot of times that was referred to as ballot Siberia. There was one ballot on which I ended up in column F, all by myself. So what ends up happening is when somebody comes into the voting booth, if they haven't done their homework and they haven't decided based on research who they support, what they might tend to do is look at this column with most of the names in it and just vote for everybody that's in that column, thinking there's probably something special about them, not ever even taking the time to look at the candidates in column B, C, D, or any of the others. So having the county's endorsement and being placed in that line with all the other candidates gives you a huge advantage, even among voters who have not taken the time to even try to figure out whether or not you're their preferred candidate. It's just the fact that you're there with all the other guys that makes their eye is drawn to you and you get their vote. So it's a very unfair system. And there were a number of lawsuits over the years to try to abolish the system in the state of New Jersey, but those lawsuits were languishing in the courts. So there were some that had been there for as many as 4 years. But when Andy Kim decided to run in the Senate race last year, he wanted to get rid of the county line system because it was disadvantaging him in particular in a very unfair way. And that had to do with the fact that Tammy Murphy, the governor's wife, decided to jump into the race, and many of the county chairs looking to curry favor with the governor offered her their endorsement.
Okay, that's a not to cut you off or anything, but I think that's a very good point to point out.
Yeah.
Because from somebody like me who doesn't know too much about any, or I didn't, now I guess I know a little bit, but as an outsider looking in, it just kind of looks like, well, why are you guys squibbling about the design of the ballot so much? But when you point out that specifically, it's like it's a very clear example.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And there has been a lot of research done that indicates that you get a 38% greater chance of winning if your name is on the line than if your name is not on the line.
Sure.
And you may be the better candidate, but if the person that the county likes because either they're networked well or they've got more money, more connections, the county doesn't always select the best candidate.
Sure.
But the candidate that the county selects always gets the best position on the ballot. So what was happening in Andy Kim's situation is that there were a lot of counties looking to curry favor with the governor, so they threw their support behind his wife. And Andy, who is one of the best, has had the reputation for being one of the best congressmen in the state of New Jersey and has the best experience, was going to end up in Ballot Siberia,
Right.
which would have given Tammy a much greater chance of winning. Someone who had never held elected office and really had no government experience other than being the wife of the governor.
Sure.
So what Andy Kim did different from the other lawsuits was ask for an injunction.
Okay.
He didn't just, file a lawsuit. He filed it with the federal government on the premise that our ballot style was unconstitutional, and he asked for an injunction for last year's primary.
What would be the differentiation of the lawsuit and an injunction? Does it speed it up?
Yes,
Oh.
absolutely.
Okay.
Because if you're asking for an injunction and you want the injunction for the primary, the case had to be heard in time for the decision to be made so that the ballots could be printed and distributed in time for the primary.
Sure.
So it put
It's more of an urgent matter type thing.
absolutely. So him filing it with a request for an injunction caused it to be heard by the federal judge.
Sure.
And the case, it actually was one day of testimony because there was such urgency. By the time it got to the court, it was well into March, and the ballots have to be printed end of March, early April, in order to get them out for early voting.
Right.
The ballots have to be distributed, I think it's
Yeah.
54 days before the election, because they have to be able to get them
Me
overseas.
going down this rabbit hole, I understand how important that is nowadays because it's,
Yeah.
this is,
Yeah.
I'm trying to just build this website, and I don't have the information just to make the website to pass along the information because things have to go through this timeline.
Yes,
that's so
very
long
definite
and
timeline.
extended, and all these things that you would have to think about strategically.
You need to get the ballots out to all of our military personnel that are around the world,
Right.
and all of our expats that are in countries all over the place.
Right.
So the ballots have to be printed by sometime in April. They're usually sent out mid-April. So 54 days before the election, these ballots have to be on their way. So the injunction happened. Judge Qureshi heard the case and ruled that it was unconstitutional and that ballot style with the part of the county line could not be used last year in the election.
And you were actually a co-plaintiff on that lawsuit.
Andy Kim did me the favor of inviting me to be a co-plaintiff on his lawsuit because he knew that I had been adversely affected in a previous election where I was at one point in Ballot Siberia in column F.
Yeah.
And I had some very unsettling interactions with one of the county chairs who had decided that he would do anything he could to make sure that I never got elected.
Right.
So with that in mind, he asked me to join him. I was very pleased to accept that offer, and I was thrilled that the decision came down the way that it did. The county clerks, who were all the defendants on that lawsuit, appealed the case, and it went to a circuit court in Philadelphia, and a three-judge panel decided that Judge Qureshi was correct in his decision, and they upheld the ruling, and that was the end of the county line in New Jersey. So
Let me see if I can offer up an alternate viewpoint. So from my perspective, as trying to inform voters, and I think it hits on something you just said in your explanation. I think it hits on something that we talked about at that meet and greet, which is if we could focus on trying to get the public to pay more attention and be more informed, not to minimize what you guys are doing, but if somebody's name was over here as opposed to over there, they would be less tempted to go with the county line because they knew who they were voting for. Like, one of the analogies that I come up with is last year, let's say hypothetically I wanted to vote for Kamala Harris. I'm not going to accidentally vote for Donald Trump because their name was just in a different spot. You know what I mean? So I get you're trying to make it as fair as possible, but I want to try and get this information out so that these issues become less like technical and like, I don't know, deep level strategy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and this is actually a perfect sample ballot because that injunction before the legislature this year made redesigned the ballot on the state level. It was only applied to Democrats. So if you see this ballot here, the Democrats have, this was last year, right? We have, this is block structure at the top?
no, this isn't last year's though. It is 24.
Yeah, look. The Democrats had block structure, which is the ruling was only affected Democrats. The Republicans tried to have it affect them too, but the judge said no because the Democrats filed them. I don't understand that. But this is a perfect example because it shows side by side our new ballot structure compared to the old one.
And this, I mean, this is an example of how confusing it can get.
Exactly.
Right? It's like, well, what are you guys doing over here? And what are they doing over there?
Right.
And it's like, I'm just like,
This won't happen again. Because, there's legislation that got passed this year, so now everybody has to go with what's called the office block style. So it was a confusing situation last year. And I, to be honest with you, that was the only thing that I was confused about with Judge Qureshi. He was the one that decided it applied only to Democrats. When the lawsuit was filed, we were filing, because I was part of that group, to make this, we were looking for a judgment to say that the county line system was unconstitutional. And if you're going to rule that it's unconstitutional, it should be unconstitutional for everyone. Right. But the way the judge wrote his order, he only made it apply to Democrats because it was a Democrat that brought the case before him. So that was odd in the fact that he did that. It was inconsistent and it was odd, but we chose to just accept it because it was a win for us. It was just odd that it didn't apply to everyone. But going forward, it does apply across the board.
And just one more note to realize, New Jersey was the only state in the country that had a ballot like this.
Sure.
All the other states.
Yeah, and then you're like, what is consistent throughout the country?
Yeah.
And I get that.
And so it's been a long time coming, and this has been the biggest electoral reform since the redraft of our state constitution in 1948.
One question I have, I heard through the grapevine somebody might be trying to randomize the order of the candidates for each individual as they go into the booth?
No. What we were trying to get when the legislation was being considered, as far as
not last year, but like moving forward.
Well, the legislation that was passed about a month or two ago, that states what the ballot should look like going forward. They allowed the public to come in and testify, and there were a number of people who testified that even if you look at a ballot that's in an office block style, which means that this is one office and these are all the people that are running for it, what we were trying to say is that in this example, I got top billing. I got lucky. It was just by a random draw that I got on the top. Well, it doesn't seem fair that I should always be on the top. So what they were trying to do was say in each municipality, they would rotate. So, like, if I was first here, then I would be second in the next one, and I would be third in the next municipality.
Oh.
And so it would be randomized by municipality.
Not ballot by ballot.
Not ballot by ballot,
Okay.
but by municipality. So that each candidate would have an opportunity to be on the top,
Right.
in the second
And that's
position, in the
randomized,
third
right.
position. That's as randomized as we think we could get it.
Yes.
Right.
But the state legislature, the Assembly and the Senate, did not agree to go with that. They
Okay.
said that on a county-wide level, there was one order, and it was by a random draw.
Yeah, okay. I think I understand what the concern was at the county level, because then they would have to make sure that all the booths, individual booths, would be set up differently or whatever.
It does require more logistical effort
Yeah.
to make sure that all of them are set up properly, but it is doable because all of the stuff is automated. So
That's where
it
because
could-
we're software engineers.
it
It's
could
like,
be
could
done.
it really? Is it really that hard?
it's
But then all
not
the
really
hardware.
that hard.
Okay.
No, it's all driven by software. So
Yeah.
the software, you could very easily have randomized the order in which people's names appear on the ballot. They opted not to include that in the legislation, but we were both at the Senate hearing where we discussed all of this, and they agreed that the legislation that they were pushing through, which said the order would be per county, not by per municipality, that while they realized that that's not the best approach, it's what they were going with for now, and they would relook at it in the
Sure.
future.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we've improved. We haven't reached perfection, but we're getting there.
Step by step.
Exactly.
So yeah, that was a lot about technicalities and the voting process. So how about the housing reform, affordability type stuff?
Okay, so my biggest thing, especially when I ran for Congress last year, was the housing crisis. And I didn't know a lot about state politics, so I'm glad I jumped into that race because it forces you to learn hyper-local politics. And when I dropped out and joined Carolyn's team, I said, this is a state issue. Congress can't sign any of this stuff. So what I'm proposing is a coastal housing act.
Okay.
So what we're realizing is, especially after COVID, after a lot of houses went into foreclosure, and what's going to happen after the market crashes here? People are going to lose their homes, and corporations are coming in and buying these things up like a kid in a candy shop. They're like buying up the properties, and they're affecting our coastal communities because instead of having year-round rentals for residents,
Oh, right.
they're buying up the houses and they're having short-term rentals. So they're like, okay, in the winter when the market's dead, you can have a 6-month lease, but come May, come March, 15 grand a month, or you'll sleep in your car and shower at Planet Fitness. And this is ripping apart our residential communities. So what I want to propose is I want to put restrictions on corporations from using and abusing short-term rental platforms like Airbnb to, have their little subcontracting platform for what they are trying to make into a condo business.
Right.
You want a condo, you want a hotel, go to a business district, buy a hotel.
Yeah, you're saying it's an abusive zoning.
It is.
Yeah.
We go down these blocks, and I talk to every voter about it. No one can find a place to live. Go on Zillow. Try to find a 12-month rental in Cape May or Cumberland County that's under $5,000 a month or $4,000 a month. It's going to be very difficult to find. And we knock on thousands of doors. I bring this up to every person I talk to. They're like, yeah, half the houses on my street are Airbnb, and it's not locals who own them. I don't want to go after the locals. I want, if someone has a second home and it's their main form of income and it's their rental property, all the way, like local empowerment. We have these people who own multi-million-dollar corporations coming from New York, coming from Pennsylvania, some places not even like in the United States.
Right.
I want to ban that in our residential communities. And I think this is a big solution. Everyone has different proposals. We'll build more affordable housing. gonna.
I was just looking at the
things like
legislation
that.
for that.
Yeah, I think we need to work towards that. Like Michigan, that's the part of me being in the military. I lived in so many different states. Michigan signed a bill building 75,000 new housing units in 5 years, and it's not just building but refurbishing. That's a good idea, but it's going to cost money. This solution will not cost the state of New Jersey a dime, and I believe it will definitely fix. It will definitely put a lot of real estate back on the market.
Yeah, and somebody who's like a fiscal conservative like myself, not spending the money and fixing the problem is definitely better than spending a whole lot of money that might get wasted.
Yeah, and
that
I like
not fix the problem.
And I'm reasonable here. Like like I said, I don't want to go after locals who depend on this. I just exclusively want to go after those corporations that are, making it hard for locals to find a place to live.
Exploiting it. Right.
So I'm drafting that as we speak.
Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Brandon mentioned, but I also wanted to pursue, you mentioned that you were looking into legislation. Were you looking into the Mount Laurel Doctrine?
I have read up on a little,
Yeah.
cursory glance or whatever, but my understanding was that it's mostly to do with zoning, the Mount Laurel Doctrine.
The Mount Laurel Doctrine, which has been in place for 50 years, it just celebrated 50 years since it was passed. The idea with that is that when a developer is planning to put up homes, they have to reserve a certain portion of that as affordable housing. They can't.
13%, is that correct?
13% is the recommended amount, but each municipality is allowed to determine what the number is for their municipality, and they do that based on the number, their population and their income, capita. It's been in place for 50 years, and it has done a lot to help with the problem, but not enough because it's not enforced. So a lot of times when builders are putting up a development, they'll go to the township and they won't be able to get the zoning changes that they need because a lot of times the land is zoned for single family homes or duplexes at the most, but not for condos. So if you want to put up something that's affordable, you generally have to put more than 2 units in. Sometimes, multi-unit dwellings are the best way to get affordability. And if the municipality refuses to change the zoning to allow for that, then the builders end up not doing it. So what we have is a problem where we've got a solution, but we're not enforcing it. So I think what we need to do, and again, this wouldn't cost the government a whole lot. You need to have some software, maybe some people that have to, work on the enforcement of it. But each municipality should be responsible for enforcing this, the Mount Laurel Doctrine. And if they are, and a particular area has a large impoverished population, then it would be bigger than 13%.
Right.
You wouldn't leave it that
based
low.
on the need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that each municipality should be responsible for taking care of its own citizens.
Right.
And it's really the builders that incur those costs. The only thing on the municipality is making sure that the zoning laws allow for it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they don't want to zone it that way because a lot of the people that can afford to have nicer homes don't want the affordable homes in their area.
NIMBY.
Yes, not in my backyard.
Right.
They're afraid that it will drive down the value of their own homes.
Right.
Well, at some point, the municipal government needs to draw the line and make sure that it happens. Because if it doesn't, then you end up with people sleeping in the woods, sleeping in their cars, showering at Planet Fitness.
And we're
Yeah.
talking.
Happens at my Planet
It's
Fitness.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
It's weird.
It's all over.
And the way I look at it, like maybe I'm more radical on this kind of thing than the average person, but it's like, well, I was just born into life. Shouldn't I just be able to find a piece of unclaimed land and just build my own home without having the government tell me whether I am allowed to or not, even though that piece of land has been vacant for 20 years or whatever?
Wouldn't it be nice?
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice? So
That's
if
not
we
the way
could-
it is, though. Yes.
If we could incentivize the businesses to just build tiny homes or affordable housing, whatever it
Even
is.
just allow, have the municipality or the state government allow for mini homes. I was looking at a property here. They wanted like $20,000 for it, and I said, "Oh, that beats like $800,000 trying to buy a house. Like, build a mini home. Like, what? I know we know contractors and stuff. If I ever want to establish myself, like, I live with 5 people right now. It's like not sustainable. Same bathroom. Oh my gosh. So
He's in college too.
It's
Well,
terrible.
yeah,
Let's remember.
But I'm
we're-
I'm getting almost closer to 30 now. But no, if we allow for these things, like I called the municipality and I said, "What's the deal with this property?" It had a 95-foot frontage. They needed a 100-foot frontage to build a house. I said, "Are you kidding me?" And then you're required to hire lawyers and get a variance, and they still can say no. And
Right.
and then I don't know if you're aware of this situation. So back in I think it was the 80s, the DEP, which I'm all for environmental protections, they did an aerial view of our South Jersey, Cape May, Cumberland County. They circled areas where they deemed might be wetlands.
What is might be wetlands?
Never have been assessed. So you have all of these
40
properties
years.
that are technically not buildable because they're deemed wetlands, but they have no assessment. So a lot of this buildable property you can't build on, and you have to go through this rigorous process of an LOI, a letter of interpretation, to get them out here to assess the property. And we need a
So much
reassessment
red
of
tape
these
just
lands.
to do anything.
Yeah, but we need legislators people who are members of the community, which is what it was meant to be. Legislators who are willing to fight for the people, and are willing to think out of the box and, dig deep and really look into other options.
As opposed to just showing up and going through the motions.
Yeah,
Right.
showing up and voting the party line, and the speaker said to vote this way. We need bold representatives that are willing to fight and not go people who are not going to bow down to leadership. That are going to what it was meant to be. If we're elected into LD1, I represent us. I represent you. And I don't care what North Jersey has to say. If they're going to sign something that's not going to benefit my people,
Right.
or is going to adversely affect our community, I will stand up and I'll say no.
Right.
Bottom
the way
line.
it should be.
Bottom line.
A person of principle, right?
Yes. Yes, definitely.
So then, what else?
You got a lot of notes on that.
I will say, it gets frustrating trying to get people to show up and correspond and all that. But just you guys having your platform basically enumerated on the site, it at least gives me an opportunity to be like, okay, I'll Google it.
Yeah.
I'll figure it out. And so now I know at least a thing or two to talk about.
Good. Good. Let's keep
Just
going.
be like, hey guys, what are you doing? So what was... Oh, so... Okay. So one thing I didn't see specifically listed on the website is the topic of immigration, unless I missed it. So I guess just generally speaking, what's your current understanding of the immigration situation in New Jersey? What's the legislation? Are you okay with it? What are you trying to do about it? Whatever.
What's the Immigrant
Trust
Trust
Act?
Act? I support the Immigrant Trust Act, which is not actually law, right?
No, it's a
directive.
directive.
Right now. So it was an executive order from Governor Murphy, and I would like to see it put into law.
Can you explain basically what that is?
You're probably better at explaining it. Are you?
So I guess where I stand with it, so basically what we're seeing right now is it's kind of rogue, right? I mean, my great-grandparents came here from Italy. We need to defend the immigrants who came here legally and the people who are contributing to our economy and are vital in our workforce in the state of New Jersey. South Jersey, we depend on immigrants for every industry down here. Our tourism industry. This would defend them, but also I'll just talk about my stance of immigration. Asylum seekers are legal. I believe asylum is, I don't believe it, they are here legally. People with visas are here legally. People with residency cards are here legally. If they're contributing to the United States, I believe they have a right to be here. I don't believe we should be targeting individuals and the right to due process, right?
Sure.
I do, personally, I think those who are proven criminals in here, send them away.
Sure.
But we can't...
Send them back to their own countries.
Yes, exactly. We can't arrest people without having evidence, and we cannot send people back without having due process of the law.
Sure.
So that's where I stand, and I believe that there is an issue and we have to address it. But we also have to open up better pathways into the country.
Sure.
You know, if there's no way to enter and you have all these people coming in, like, it's terrible. And then you have the DACA, the children who were brought here when they were young kids.
Right.
Where are they going to go back to? Some of these people don't even speak the language from which they were born. They've been here their whole life. So I do support parts of the Immigrant Trust Act, and I do support immigrant communities, and I also support, you know, getting rid of the criminals.
Sure.
So I feel like I'm very in the middle on it. I'm very fair with my stance on it, and yeah, and I've seen on the ground like how it should go, like in the Coast Guard. They had the due process of law when some of these,
like they showed up with an actual warrant.
Oh yeah.
And they had reason to conduct the arrest or whatever.
And a lot of people, like, they think, oh, Democrat, like, I think everyone has this, like, false perception. They think everyone falls under this blanket. People forget, when I joined the Coast Guard, it was the end of Obama's term. Obama ended the wet foot, dry foot policy. So that policy was, if migrants could get to the United States soil, they could stay. They were here legally.
Right.
Obama ended that. So right prior to I got to getting to my unit, they would get boats with like 300 people on it. That's dangerous. They're in these tiny little boats. Like I know you guys hear the stories of them finding these ships capsized and none of the people survived. So when Obama signed that into law, that ended wet foot, dry foot, we would get like 3 or 5.
Right.
And we were doing the mission. We were in the East Pacific. We were in the Caribbean Sea. Like, we were there. Many months of patrolling those seas. That significantly decreased the amount of illegal immigration by sea.
Right.
So I want to protect our immigrants that are here, legally, and that contribute to our country.
Right.
It's very complicated.
Oh, sure.
And then it's a very,
for somebody like me, you just, it's like a problem of scale. The way I look at it, it's like it's so many people, right? But I understand lots of people have been here for a long time, they contribute, but when the numbers get big, that's when I get concerned.
It is, and then in a state like ours, with the infrastructure, they're trying to put a detention center in Newark. And if Newark doesn't want a detention center, what are we going to build, like concentration camps? Like, that's wrong.
Right.
No. We barely have enough land for affordable housing. What are we doing?
Don't ask me.
But then
I'll go and try to figure it out.
But it's very complicated, and it would require a lot of discussion with experts, with people of all different backgrounds, and I'd be willing to even talk about it further.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And
Carolyn.
Sure.
We don't have all the same stances on everything, but
yeah, I pretty much agree with what you said. I feel strongly that anybody who comes to this country and requests asylum is not here illegally. They're here legally. The problem is that once they get here and request asylum, it sometimes takes years before their asylum cases are heard.
Backed up.
And during those years, if they're not able to get papers that allow them to work legally, they end up working illegally, and then they're committing crimes. But or the crime of working illegally. I shouldn't say they're committing crimes. Like they're not. So few immigrants, like the statistics will tell you that very few immigrants get involved in crime once they come to this country. Far fewer than the citizens of this country. So it's not like they're coming here to commit crime. They're actually coming here to look for a better way of living. The thing that needs to happen is at the federal level, we have to change the laws at the border. We have to get more judges down there. We have to get these cases heard more quickly.
I mean, if there's nothing else that I would contribute, it's we want to reaffirm to the average person that everything actually is
legal,
accounted for and
yes,
legal and not backed up for years and all that kind of stuff.
So the investment needs to be made in more judges, people that don't qualify. Let's not wait 6 years to find out that they don't qualify. Let's turn them around right then and there.
Right.
But if they do qualify, let's bring them in. Let's let them work. Let's let them become contributing members of our society. So, I mean, I'm very frustrated with what we see on the news now because I think it's a lot of grandstanding. It's a lot of trying to convince the American people that all immigrants are criminals. That is absolutely not the case. I don't like using immigrants as props or propaganda. I don't like what I'm seeing. And I also don't like the fact that I'm not seeing any legislation being moved to fix the problems at the border. I mean, if all you're going to do is, treat people without due process, treat people in a way that is unconstitutional, you're not solving the problem. You're just creating a whole different problem. I think what the Trump administration is doing is trying to scare people from even coming to this country. And that's not really what we want, because this country needs immigrants. Immigrants have been the lifeblood of the country. There are so many jobs in this country that we cannot get our citizens to take. So if we get rid of all the immigrants, there are so many things that people are going to find that don't get done. And I don't think people are going to be happy with that either. So we have to find the right balance. We have to let in the right people. We have to give them the opportunity to become contributing members and let them pay taxes. Let them pay into Social Security. Right now they're paying into Social Security and they may get rejected and sent out before they're ever able to collect. And I guess unless they become citizens, I think they'll never be able to collect what they're putting in. So they're actually helping us to a certain extent. But anyway, it's a very complicated issue. There's not a lot of it that comes down to the state level, but at the state level, I would like to see people protected. I don't want to see ICE raids going after people because they have a tattoo. That's certainly not indicative of any crimes having been committed. I do agree that anybody who is here and has committed a crime should be allowed to be deported after the due process has taken place.
Sure.
So that's pretty much my stance on it.
Yeah, cool. Then I've got the reducing tolls was up on your website.
Okay. This is my issue.
Not mine.
When you guys, if we're going too long, you gotta
No,
just let me know.
I could
I'm
go for a
enjoying
glass
this.
of water.
Sure.
This is actually my issue.
Can you get some water, please?
3 water?
Sure.
Yeah, please.
Please, thank you. I'm just saying, I know it's been a long day. I don't want to keep
That's
you
okay.
longer than what, because we could probably go
Are you going to
as long as Cory Booker went the
No,
other day.
we can't do that long.
I'm just saying, don't.
Oh
don't
yeah, are you gonna crop and edit stuff, or is this
if I
all-
feel like it's
Okay.
necessary.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in no hurry.
Okay.
Yeah. So for the reduce the tolls, it was actually my mother's ill right now. I'll get into that later. But it was her idea when I was running for Congress, and I was thinking really hard about it. Growing up here, as a low-income high school student who finally worked 2 jobs and got this rickety old car. I could barely afford back then to go up the Parkway and go to the mall and, buy clothes for myself and things like that. The tolls back then were $1.50 a piece, and then you have to, whatever. Now they're $2 something? They're increasing every
And
year.
we're not even talking about going into Philly or New
Yeah,
York.
$6,
Right.
$12, whatever.
I used to play in a band. We would travel all over. Every year I'd be like, oh, Again?
Yeah.
And
Again?
the legislature signed I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but they signed a 10-year bill of every year it's going to increase 10 cents.
Thank you so much.
Was it? Are you talking about the 3% auto increase, or did you say 10%?
10 cents, I think, or
10
something.
cents.
It was something like that.
Thank you.
There's an increase every year,
Yeah.
and it's totally getting out of control. There's no alternative. Like on the west side of New Jersey, you have Route 55, right?
Yeah.
No tolls there. Route 9. They took where that bridge is up near Northfield. They knocked that bridge down.
Okay.
So when you're trying to travel on the east side of the state from south to north, you have to take the parkway.
Oh, okay.
So you're being forced to drive on the road, pay all this money. What about our right to travel? You know, and another thing on there is the beach tax.
Is that the Constitution?
Interstate travel.
The right to
I don't
travel.
know what it is, but it's getting out of control, and it's really putting a burden on the lower class, like people like me.
Well, here's my thought on it. You know, we're in this like age of Doge or whatever, and everything's getting canceled or whatever. But at a fundamental, like, if we're just accepting the fact that government needs to at least exist a little bit, and we do have public services that are shared, roads are like one of the first common examples. So couldn't we just agree that it's part of our inherent tax system and everybody contributes equally, and then we don't have to worry about... Because I just looked up legislation when they're giving rebates to people who use their Easy Pass more than 35 times a month. Did you see that
Really?
one?
No.
Yeah, and I'm just like, this is... I get what you're trying to do, but it's convoluted.
And it's public
You know what I
knowledge.
mean?
If you go to see where that Easy Pass money is going, everyone's, oh, the roads, they're fixing up the roads. No, it's not going to the roads. A lot of this money is going to like NJ Transit or, you know, whatever. As someone from South Jersey, we have what, like 2 or 3 bus lines? No trains. Why are we funding NJ Transit when we have no transit?
I was about to raise the same point. But, you know.
Right.
Get rid of
Right.
it.
We need mass transit down here.
Yeah, we're the, if you look at some of these surveys, some of these articles online, we're like the second highest taxed burden state in the country.
Right.
In the country. So yeah, that was my mom's idea, and I took it and, you know, really did some research, and I would be in favor of drastically reducing the toll amount or entirely getting rid of them.
Yeah, and then just collect the money through a more direct tax
Sorry,
system,
Miss
maybe.
Easy Pass Innovator.
Oh no, that wasn't directed at you, obviously.
No, I actually have a different point of view. I think that for the most part, if you are not able to pay the tolls, you can find other roads to use.
Yeah.
So the toll roads, the idea of toll roads is, you know, perhaps the tolls that are being collected are not being used in the best way, and we should fix that. But I think that toll roads are a good way of collecting money because people take them for the convenience of it, but I think there are other ways around, and I don't disagree that when they took down that bridge that was probably condemned, I don't think they took it down for no reason. I think the bridge was ready to fall down, and they took it down. There are ways to get from point A to point B without going on the parkway, because I do it all the time. I'm cheap. So I find ways to go north and south without paying tolls. So it can be done, and I think that if you're going to use the toll roads, the money should be used in a more targeted way. So I don't like the idea of taking that money and pumping it into mass transit upgrades in the north when we still don't have any mass transit down here. So I still think that collecting tolls is fair, and that it should be the funds collected should be used to benefit our area
But
somewhat.
do you agree that the hikes in the tolls are ridiculous? Like what, when I come back and I'm down here 10 years from now, we're going to have $10 tolls and 5 of them. If you take one road, it's going to cost $200 to get to, you know, wherever in New York.
But if people take other routes, then they probably won't push it that high. If it drives people off the roads, they won't do it. I think it's a supply and demand kind of thing. Like if people are going off those roads because the tolls are too high, they will stop raising it because they'll want people to come back on. But I don't necessarily have a problem with toll roads.
Sure. Yeah.
So we differ on some things, but
Yeah,
you
of
know,
course.
we're here like
You're not carbon copies of each
yeah,
other.
yeah.
That's a true statement.
Okay, so then the next thing was regulating green energy pricing.
Oh yeah.
Does this relate to like the NJBPU stuff and whatever?
So this is a lot. This has a lot to do with, you know, I was really thinking out of the box. The windmill was a hot topic in last year's congressional race, and everyone's talking about this green energy. But you know, I went to so many meetings, and I'm so over the discussion. Like, okay, now when they build the green energy, because some of it's being built, like it's already underway. How are our taxpayer dollars paid for these projects? Are we going to ensure that for-profit organizations don't come in and profit off of our taxpayer dollars?
Can you explain how that would happen?
So, you know, right now we have monopolies. You have
Sure.
Atlantic City Electric, what's up north?
PCNG.
Yeah, PCNG. When you have one entity take over that's like not like Vineland is municipal owned, it's not government owned, they take advantage of it. They set the price, you know, and I want legislation preventing that because we fund.
I mean, that should be inherent, right?
Oh yeah.
We've had antitrust or monopoly laws
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
Yeah.
forever, right?
But why are the energy companies like immune from those laws?
Not enforced, kind of like the other issue we were talking about.
So I want to force competition. That's another thing. I want to force competition with the energy companies. It's getting out of control. People having $400 or $500 electric bills. But with this green energy, I want legislation writing to ensure that because taxpayer dollars paid for this, we hire a company to come in to install or whatever. We have state employees. It's a state ran, you know, for to keep up with the maintenance and everything and run them. It brings economy and it brings jobs in, but I want to ensure that it's not for profit. That every single dollar that we spend to pay for this energy is not going in the back of someone's pocket.
Oh, sure.
That it's solely used for the maintenance and sustainability of the energy being provided. And no one's talking about that. So it was an idea I had. I said, you know what, we're talking about, oh, we want it, we don't want it. I'm talking about if they're going to put it up, let's regulate it and let's make sure that we're not price gouging for the citizens of New Jersey.
Yeah, I think most people around here would agree with that.
It's getting out of control. And I had a lot of conversations with people recently regarding the outrageous electric bills, especially down here with Atlantic City Electric. It's time to put that to an end.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't really have anything to add to that.
Okay, cool. Switching back over, we just did that. Okay, so one thing that I've been hearing about consistently is the state of New Jersey is on its way to a fiscal cliff. Have you heard that we're structurally at a $1.2 billion deficit with the budget? And I guess the governor's budget just passed last year, and it's going to exacerbate the problem. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on what's the current state of the budget?
We had a surplus. Don't we have a
$3 billion
surplus that they're refusing to tap into
Yeah.
at this point? I'm not really sure.
Maybe my information.
We have to look into it. No, I think there's a special fund that's the surplus, so we may very well be in a deficit, budget wise, but we may have a different pool. I think it's a different pool of money for emergencies.
It's just not being used.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I have no doubt that what you're saying is accurate. My bigger concern, though,
in this world right now, I could be misled just as much as anybody else.
No, I think that you probably are right. But my bigger concern right now is that it's going to only get worse because a lot of the federal funding is going to dry up. So if there are services that the people in the state of New Jersey are used to receiving, we're either not going to get those services or we're going to have to go deeper into deficit spending in order to provide them. Things like educating children with special needs. If if that gets pulled, the government pulls that funding back, or FEMA, if they pull back the FEMA funding, then the state of New Jersey is going to have to, come up with more funding to fix natural disasters or to educate our children. So if we're on the precipice of a fiscal cliff right now, I only see it getting worse,
Right.
which is scary.
Right. It's something that would need to be addressed immediately. Probably.
It is.
I mean, I guess as somebody looking in from the outside.
It's part of what makes me wonder, like when you hear almost every candidate that's running, whether they be for governor, whether they be Democrat or Republican, they're all talking about cutting our taxes. And I know most New Jersey residents would love to see their taxes cut. But that's the source of revenue for the state. Yeah, right? Exactly. Like if you're going to cut those taxes, where are you getting the money from? Or what services are you planning to cut when unless you're going to doge the state, which,
right.
And I don't want it to be doged the way it's happening at the federal government. I'm sure there are efficiencies to be had, and maybe, the right person can go in there and find ways to do things that are being done now for less money. That's what should be done. But to just make a blanket statement, I'm going to cut your taxes by 15%, I want to know how.
I mean, this is tangential, but it's somewhat related. I was talking to a couple candidates last year. One guy running for city commissioner in Millville, and one guy going for township council in Cedarville. And the issue, every once in a while, I'm just like, wait, how much do you guys get paid? And the guy from Millville was like, I get $9,000 a year. And the guy from Cedarville was like, well, I'm not elected yet, but my understanding is they make $0 a year. And I said, why don't you just propose that you get like a salary that's respectable so that you could just focus on doing that job, and then maybe you would spend more time doing
solving the problems, right? Yeah.
But then they say, well, then we'd have to propose raising taxes. I'm like, yeah, but we're talking about leadership.
Yeah.
Like, how do you not pay leadership appropriately?
Right.
So anyway, even being a fiscal conservative, you still have to spend money.
Right.
And if that means raising taxes every once in a while, you got to do it, right? Anyway.
I think I'm not an economist by no means. So I definitely would love to sit in the room with leading economists in the state or in the nation to further go over this. But I'm sure there's ways. I mean, like Carolyn and I, we're running a campaign here. A lot of candidates spend over $100,000 to do what we have done so far, and we have spent very fraction of that amount. So, growing up knowing how to budget a checkbook or have a tight wallet, I think that would benefit being in New Jersey State Legislature.
You would bring that mindset.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I grew up in a large family that was not wealthy. So the meaning of having money is, I don't take that lightly. So I would never be one that would be willing to spend other people's money. Like even as somebody who's campaigning, I'm cognizant of the fact that as people contribute to our campaign, that's their hard-earned cash.
Sure.
We better be spending it wisely. So we're doing a lot of stuff ourselves. We're doing a lot with volunteers, as opposed to spending money that could be used better somewhere else. So you're right. That kind of mindset is what we would bring to the legislature.
Cool. Yeah. Let's move on to healthcare. Now I know this first thing's very controversial issue, but we start with like the reproductive rights, family planning, and all that. As we talked about in our little correspondence, sometimes people just don't even know what the current law is. So could we take a minute for you guys to explain in your own words how far the family planning reproductive law goes to protect reproductive rights, and then we'll dive deeper into like what your specific stance on it might be.
I know that women's reproductive rights are protected in the state of New Jersey. I don't believe that there are restrictions on when a woman can get an abortion.
Right.
I happen to agree that that is appropriate, but would be willing, if there was a need to compromise, I would be willing to have, just like Roe v. Wade had 24 months as, no,
Was it
24 weeks.
Yeah.
24 months?
It's a long pregnancy.
I'm like, I knew that didn't sound right. It's 24 weeks
Yeah.
as the point of viability, and then after which it would only be approved if it was to save or to protect the health and life of the mother.
Right.
So I would be okay with that, but the person who determines that the woman's health is at risk or her life is at risk needs to be a doctor and
Sure.
not a legislator.
Sure.
So that would be, like, I would accept a restriction like that as long as the decision maker was a doctor or, maybe two doctors or whatever, but not a Congress or a representative. So I'm willing to, allow certain restrictions, but only if they are enforced by physicians and not by politicians.
Right.
And as far as my personal beliefs, I, for a long time, was what you would call, I would have called pro-life.
Yeah.
I still am pro-life, but I am more pro-choice than I am pro-life.
Sure.
Because I believe that any woman, no one has a right to tell any woman what she can and cannot do with her own body. Least of all, me telling some other person. It's my body,
Yeah,
I get my
autonomy.
choice. My choice might have been not to have an abortion had I ever been put in that position. Fortunately, that was never a decision I had to make, but I cannot judge anyone who finds himself in a position and their choice is different than what mine might have been. So I believe every woman has the right to make her own decision.
Yeah. I generally would consider myself a moderate on the subject, and that's kind of why I like spelling out what the law actually says. And so I think a lot of people, when I have this conversation, they don't realize that it goes all the way up until the point of birth, and there's no reason necessary. And then it also goes to...
Oh, yeah, okay.
It
now.
then becomes taxpayer funded. And I think now it's gone to private insurance as well. So as in, all the insurance companies are funding, no questions asked, up until the point of birth. And I think that's a little bit much for a lot of people.
But I don't think it happens.
And that's where the conversation usually goes.
Yeah,
So,
I don't think that it happens that way. The law may allow for that, but as someone who has carried several pregnancies
Sure.
to the 9-month point and given birth, it's a difficult thing to go through.
Sure.
No way would somebody go through it for 9 months and then decide right before it was time to deliver, I'm going to abort this child. Like
Yeah.
that, it's just not something that
I-
happens. When you hear about an abortion at that late stage, it's because there's something wrong.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with the child. There's something wrong
I
with
think
the
what
mother.
happens though is that because of the way it's written,
Yeah.
then it's like, well,
People
wait,
believe
who
that
is
it's
doing
happening.
it?
Yeah.
And it's like,
And it's
can
not.
we write it in a different way that makes it not look that way? I don't know.
And yes, it probably could be written better, but I think that people that take that and run with it and say that people are killing their babies right before they're born, it's just not happening.
Sure.
So
Yeah, that doesn't happen. They don't. That's called adoption. Like,
Well, yeah.
Once the child is viable, outside of the womb, they do adoption. I'm not a woman. I have a lot of friends in my life that are women. So I also support legislators staying out of the decision making between a female and a doctor. But I also agree that abortion shouldn't be used as a form of birth control.
Sure.
So
it very rarely is.
I know. I think we need right now, instead of talking, about that, we need to beef up, and instead of degrading like birth control and contraception, we need to beef that up. We need to And then with the publicly funded stuff, like, instead of like talking bad about Planned Parenthood, let's applaud them for like doing some of this work, like not on the government's dime, like supplying contraceptives. And Planned Parenthood does more than just abortion, like
Oh my God.
abortions.
Abortions are such a small part.
STDs. They handle like teens and like young adults that have STDs and don't have health insurance or can't go to the hospital or something.
They do all kinds of screenings.
Yeah.
They offer a lot more services than just abortions. And in fact, abortion, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's such a small percentage of their total offerings that it's ridiculous that funding gets cut from them. Because it gets cut from people that need other services as well.
Yeah, as someone who lived in Florida for a few years during, like, I was literally living in St. Petersburg when Roe v. Wade, like, the Dobbs decision was made. When you start imposing restrictions in wording legislation the way they have in Florida, like 6 weeks or whatever, there have been people who have died. So many people have died that are being required to carry their child through stillbirth. Like the child is dead.
Yeah,
and,
it's too far.
They're getting sepsis, they're getting major infections and still being turned away from the hospital. We have in southern states, like, OBGYNs are fleeing. They can't get maternity care. Here, I have to look into it again, but the hospital I was born at, Burdett Tomlin, they're Cooper now, they got rid of their maternity services. So, we're in a desert down here.
Yeah,
so the
desert.
The hospital I was born in doesn't give births anymore. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's obviously out of control.
But we can't be too extreme, and we have to like look into the consequences of what things like this would bring if we were to get a legislature or a governor that would be willing to do to New Jersey what Florida did or what Texas did. You hear the stories on social media. I will make sure that does not happen in this state.
And part of the reason that we see that is because they are not having, they don't allow abortions for no reason up until the end. So if something happens after a certain 6 weeks or whatever the cutoff is for that state, if you need an abortion, your doctor may recommend it, but if the court says that it's not necessary, they can overrule the doctor. So that's part of the problem.
Right.
So if you have you have the wrong people involved in the decision-making process, and then you end up with doctors that are afraid to care for their patients, and that's not pro-life.
It feels like there's just not enough trust in
doctors.
that the system is operating the way it should be.
Right. And I don't understand why that is. I don't understand why people think that they have a right to tell a woman when she has a non-viable pregnancy that she cannot get rid of it. But that's just such an intrusion on a woman's life and could cause a woman's death. It's just totally unacceptable.
And what's the next one? Oh, mental health support. That in regards to healthcare in general. I know there was something about that with the veterans stuff, and I think there's legislation right now to help evaluate PTSD, make that. But I don't know if you want to touch on that and general mental health support or whatever.
Yeah, I want to beef up. That's like I won't go into too much detail with the veteran, but I do want to beef up mental health support. I talked a little bit about it earlier. I have a lot of my friends and people I served with that are not well or that unfortunately have not made it. And I want better support systems. Mental health care. When I was running for Congress about a year into my campaign, my mother had a break and she became schizophrenic. This state of New Jersey has basically, their laws make it so it's impossible for me to get her help. So because unfortunately before she had gone into psychosis, which she's currently in now, she doesn't even think I'm her son or anything. We didn't have a durable power of attorney signed. And it's like a catch-22. So unless there's a child involved, like a minor, or unless there's a criminal case, the court cannot mandate a psych eval. And there's very specific rules. So my mom was in the psych ward twice, and the psych ward couldn't do the psych eval for guardianship, for me to file for guardianship to get her help. There's medications that will help. The hospital's not allowed to do the psych eval for guardianship.
I mean, let me, just for clarity, why are they not allowed to do the psych eval? No, I mean, but what's the steelman argument for it?
They think that it's the responsibility of me as the petitioner to put forth evidence to the court.
Even though it's like blatantly obvious?
Yes, even though I have diagnoses, even though I have text messages.
How is that not considered sufficient evidence?
I don't know.
Okay, all right. It's confusing. That's
So
all.
they require me to have 2 physicians, which I would have to hire, to evaluate her, and then I would have
She
to
would have
submit
to
that.
consent to the
She would have to
evaluation.
consent
But she
to the,
can't,
but
right?
she can't because she's
Right,
incapacitated.
the
She's not.
catch-22 conundrum.
Yes.
Right. So it had to have been done before the break.
Before she went,
Okay.
schizophrenic.
Yeah.
And they basically, I see it as them sentencing my mother to death. And it's not just me. I met so many other people going through this, and it hit me. And I said, our mental health care in New Jersey is trash. Is trash. One of the facilities we went into, I had her go to before she completely lost it. It made her worse. So there's a lot. I've been recognized by Inseparable Action as a 2025 Mental Health Now candidate, and I will fight for everyone dealing with any type of, family mental health issue. Specifically, I just proposed my first piece of legislation. I named it after my mom, the Save Nina Act. It's for guardianship reform in the state. It mirrors Florida's procedures. So in Florida, me as the next of kin, all I would have to do is have a little bit of evidence, like text messages, her diagnosis, and I would send that in. The court appoints 2 physicians to do the evaluation. So I aim to mirror that in New Jersey. And it's not just schizophrenia, it's like any type of disease that brings in psychosis. Patients who have dementia and forget who their loved ones are. I've had stories of a constituent saying I had to forge a signature to get a mother that has dementia help because I didn't have power of attorney. I don't want people to have to do that. They said, I'm sorry, and I said, you shouldn't be sorry. The state should have processes where you don't have to do that.
Right.
So that's the first bill I actually want to get through. And it would put the responsibility on the court to get the evaluation. It does 2 things. It allows me to seek guardianship for my mother and help her. It stops the danger to herself and others. But it ends biases. If I were to hire doctors, say she was not fully out of it, and she's like, okay, I'll get evaluated. And I'm like, you better, if I hired you, I'm paying you.
Oh, right.
You better side with me and help me get guardianship. In New Jersey, once you get guardianship, it's hard to get out of it. Instead, the court would appoint, so there's no biases. I think it would make it more fair for the patient and for the family member. So that's a big thing for me. More with healthcare, mental health care. We need inspections of these psych facilities.
I bet.
Oh, not just psych. We need the drug crisis. I'm going to couple rehabs in with this. So I have a lot of experience. I was a server for a long time. When I was a server in Michigan, what they would do is they'd have someone come in and act like they were a customer. And then if I didn't card them for alcohol, you'd get fired on the spot.
Secret customer,
Yeah.
the ABC type stuff.
I want to build a critical mission team in the state of New Jersey that anonymously goes into psych wards as patients. And if you are not following regulations or your facility is bad, we're going to shut you down. We're going to take you over. You're going to get a warning. You fail the second warning, the state of New Jersey owns you.
sounds kind of like it would reflect, I might be wrong, but the long-term care stuff too.
Oh yeah.
Same kind of, have somebody walk in and be like, what's going on?
Yeah, and I know someone who is actually doing a lot in the state of New Jersey for long-term care, the executive director, and she took over after the COVID situation happened, and they formed many critical mission teams. But it's the responsibility of the legislature to sign bills. It's bad within all these institutions, the long-term care, the psych wards, and the rehabs. They get a warning when they're getting inspected, and you know how that goes. Everyone better be good today. We're getting inspected. Make sure this is done. No, you're going to get seen in action, and we're going to figure out how you actually operate your facility. And if you're breaking New Jersey state law, you will face the consequences. And the same with rehabs. No accountability. How many people, I know people personally who have unfortunately passed away from a fentanyl overdose because they were turned away from a rehab in the state of New Jersey because they weren't deemed risk enough, because they had been clean for 2 months or 2 years. I want to make it so that they cannot turn anyone away seeking help. And if they do it, it will be a crime.
Because that's the whole point
we
of
will
it.
prosecute that facility. So there's a lot. I have the thing is, when it's personal, it's real.
Sure.
And when it's real, you'll fight for something harder than you'll fight for anything. So anyone out there struggling with family members or yourself with mental health, or people who have drug addiction, I will fight for you, and I'll fight for us.
Cool. Yeah.
Sorry, that was a lot.
No, and I appreciate it, because it feels like me with the informing the vote thing. People look at me like, why are you banging your head against the wall for this thing, blah, blah, blah. It's like, this basic stuff, right?
Yeah.
People should know what they're voting for.
Yeah.
It might be a long, hard journey, but it's got to be done.
And I appreciate the fact that you're allowing us to get the message out.
Oh, go for it.
And I agree with everything that Brandon said as far as, healthcare in our state. I have had some personal experience as well, trying to get loved ones mental health care, and I have found that it is less than adequate here in the state. Not only is it hard to get, I had a son who passed away, but prior to that, he needed to be inpatient a number of different times to deal with substance abuse and mental health issues, and it was sometimes hard to find a place for him to be admitted. And once he was admitted, it was not, the places that he went to tried their best. They weren't providing the right level of mental health care, and when he came out, he would maybe be good for a few months, but then he would slip back into it. So the help that they provided wasn't sufficient. The outpatient care, the doctors were so overwhelmed. They had so many patients that they had to deal with. They weren't able to give the level of care that was necessary. He didn't eventually die from his mental health issues, but they certainly contributed to his passing. So we do need to look into the way we help those in our state that are the most needy, and make sure that we take care of them and get them the care that they need. And in general, our healthcare system, not just in the state of New Jersey, but in the country of the United States of America, is pitifully below what it should be. For being the wealthiest country in the world, we provide the worst care to our citizens. And I don't know what the answer to that is. It's not an easy answer, but I think we need to keep striving to get to it. I'm not sure how much of the fix can happen at the state level, but that is something that I will look into. I think having healthcare as a for-profit industry is a problem, because the companies that are providing the healthcare are more incentivized to create profit for their shareholders than they are to provide good services to those in need. So we have to figure out a better way of doing this. I'm not saying that I have the answer now, but I'm saying that it is a priority for me, and it is something that I will look into and try to craft legislation that will help the people in the state of New Jersey to get the better care, both for physical illness and mental illness. It's all wrapped up together and needs a lot of attention.
Yeah, I agree. Being healthy is one of my priorities in life. It takes time, it takes money, it takes attention, and you can't just throw money in the wrong direction, I guess is just one way to put it.
Right, definitely.
You have a lot of items there.
I did, dude, I went down the rabbit hole. That's why I'm saying, like, I don't necessarily want to keep you guys here all day, so. What about the current state of law enforcement in New Jersey? There's questions all over the country about, or concerns, not finding enough people to fill the positions, and so then crime escalates because there's not enough people patrolling the streets, enforcing stuff, blah, blah, blah. What would your take on that type of topic be?
Well, I think crime escalates because of poverty, because of children being brought up in circumstances that are beyond their control, but do not push them in the right direction in life without the guidance that they need. So I think crime spiraling is not as much a factor of not having enough police on the beat as it is social problems that we have with inequities, with poverty, and a lot of the situations where we cut after school programs where kids have nothing else to do, they end up finding the wrong things to do. So as far as crime, I think that there are different ways to approach bringing crime down. The biggest thing that I would say with the police force is that I would like to make sure that when there is a call for, because there's a mental health situation, that a trained mental health expert is sent along with the police so that the police aren't responsible for de-escalating a situation that they're not qualified to do. So if they come upon somebody who is having a mental breakdown, that they don't just go after them and shoot them, because that happens way too often. So I would like to see our police be supplemented with trained individuals that can de-escalate. What do you think?
I think that the police force, I support our police. After the George Floyd riots, there was this public perception that was kind of bad. A lot of people calling to defund the police. We don't need to do that. The thing is, there are bad cops. Every town has bad cops. Corrupt. Some of the people are probably insiders on the drug trade. It's terrible. But there are for as many bad cops, there are a lot more good cops. We need a system that creates a set standard in the state of New Jersey. We need proper trainings. How is our police force going to be able to respond to specific situations, especially when, I call in because my mom told me she's going to kill herself and they don't know what to do. Like, they need trainings. They need more trainings on policy. They need workshops. We need to get them educated more on the law and have rebuild that public trust in the force. And I think that has contributed to the decline of people wanting to become officers because, you go in, you want to protect the community, you're a good cop, you still get attacked because you're a cop.
Right.
And we have this rhetoric going around that cops are bad.
Right.
I've had some friends, even I had conversations with this about, they're like, I don't trust any cops. I'm like, you shouldn't think that way. Because for everyone, there's probably 100 good cops.
Right.
So we need to invest in regaining public trust in our police force, and we need to protect those that are on the streets protecting us. And along with the trainings, and then once that's done, I think it would be easier to recruit more people.
Right. rebrand and supplement with helpful resources, like you're saying. Not everybody's trained to do everything, right?
Right.
Expecting a cop to be a psychiatrist at the same time
Yeah,
is
it doesn't
not
work.
a realistic expectation.
Right.
So yeah, I hear you on that.
Yeah. So, thank you.
What about, there's a lot of stuff going on with the LGBT rights situations going on. Is there any general messaging that you guys have with that?
Just leave them alone.
I just
Well,
think,
generally speaking, that's what I'd say too. But
My
let
thing,
people
like,
be
of course,
people.
yeah, I'm a part of the community. Like, and can we just all just live and let live?
Yeah.
Like, mind your own business. Like, come on.
yeah,
Like,
no, I mean, hey,
not
generally
you,
speaking,
but like,
yeah, but I guess as a moderate, I kind of have to say, when it comes to the issues like the fairness in women's sports stuff,
I know,
to
but
me
that's-
it goes too far.
it does. It's one person.
You just never know
here,
who's going to go so far
we
and
discussed
what is this.
We
you know?
discussed this. Do you want to hear my idea on it? Because
Sure.
I am LGBT.
Sure.
The G.
I'm the G,
You're the
whatever.
G and LGBT.
I'm Gen Z, whatever. I think in the sports, it's not fair. A biological male has a different bone structure, more muscles, But the thing is, we can't exclude. So when we're competing, let the trans woman compete alongside, but have a different league.
Yeah,
So
I've been
she'll
saying
be the
that for a
first
while.
trans woman, and then we'll have the first biological woman, and that'll encourage more trans athletes to join in, and they'll have their own league
Right.
build up. Because now if we're like, okay, we're gonna compete with, because I have transitioned and my identity is a female now, I'm gonna compete alongside in the same competition, but I know that there's 3 spots for trans, 3 spots for biological cis female. Now that's going to be like, oh my gosh, so you're running unopposed, so who's going to be 2 and 3? Now we're going to have more trans swimmers, and then they can form their own league.
Right.
I don't think we should entirely exclude them from the sport, but I think they should have
No, you would
their
want
own-
anybody to
No,
grow up and be
designation.
competitive.
It's
and-
a different thing. Like,
Yeah.
and they acknowledge like trans women are not the same as cis-born, biological females. So let's compromise. Let's meet in the middle, and let's do this.
And let's
create a
stop
new league.
arguing about it because
Yeah, it's just
such a small
it
statistic.
is.
It is.
Yeah, and I guess what I would say, that's the first point. It's such a small part of our population to have become such a big part of our dialogue. So it's unfortunate that it was blown out of proportion. But one thing I would say is, and this is only because I know someone who is a trans woman, trans girl, I guess she's 18 now, 17 or 18. She transitioned before she hit puberty. So she was a biological male, never went through puberty as a male, has played all through grade school and high school field hockey,
Yeah.
girls field hockey. She's a girl. She does not, you might say she has bigger, but if you saw this person, you would never believe that she was not born as a female. I don't think it would be right to exclude her from girls' sports because she transitioned before puberty. I think that's the difference.
I hear where you're coming from. I think for the average person, it's going to be such a gray area that's going to be difficult to persuade so
I
many
think
people.
it doesn't need to be legislated. I think it can be dealt with on a case-by-case basis because it is such a small problem. Not a problem, it's a small population for whom this is an issue.
Yeah.
I think, some places are saying that they're going to do genitalia checks before sports.
That's a bit
That's
much.
terrible, especially if we're talking about children. Youth athletics, you're going to do that?
Right.
For something that is such a minor part of the thing overall, to subject every participant to something invasive like that, it's crazy. People have gone way over the top. So I think there are ways that it's such a small problem, it can be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, and I think that it would be wrong to exclude anybody that transitioned prior to puberty, it would be wrong to exclude them from full participation. If somebody went through puberty and at age 18 decided to transition, it's a different story. They're biologically stronger and should not be competing head to head with another female. But I think that's a case by case basis.
Sure, I can understand that approach.
And I think what our president is currently doing, where he is pulling funding from schools because they allowed a trans individual to participate in sports, is insane. That's punishing every student that ever went there for a decision that the school made that was the school's decision to make. You know, there was no law in place that they violated.
Right.
It's an opinion of the president's that they may not have even known that he had.
Right.
But even still, even if they
Some
didn't,
weird retroactive punishment. is what you're saying.
exactly, and it's not right. It bothers me. It bothers me that all of this discussion is happening about the trans community, because if you know anybody who is trans, you know that they are incredibly vulnerable. None of them choose to be in the wrong body, but once they realize that they are and they take that step to correct a situation in their lives, they are so incredibly vulnerable. And all this discussion about them and putting them down and otherizing them is hurting them even more. And it's just not something that we should be doing to our fellow citizens, because for the most part, they don't want the attention. They don't want to be, most of them don't even want to be.
Well, maybe not all of them, but I know a couple who are attention seekers.
As is the case
With everybody.
with human beings
Right,
in
sure.
general. Some are, some aren't.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they're very vulnerable. And even if they're seeking attention, that may be to cover up for some sort of, feelings that they may be having.
Sure.
But to focus on them and make them even more uncomfortable, shame on us. We should not be allowing it to happen.
Let's switch over to policy 5756.
Mm-hmm.
You know that one?
Yes?
I looked
Very
into
well.
that fairly. Basically, I looked it over quickly because of the way it played out in my community.
Violent?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was informed about it basically like 2 or 3 days before they were going to have their school board meeting about it.
I went to the school board hearing.
You were there for that?
Mhm.
Okay. So
I spoke.
You might remember my statement about it. So for people who don't know, this was basically like not allowing the teachers to tell the parents about kids who are transitioning. Is that
Slight difference. Instead of not allowing, it's not requiring. It doesn't
I
require
just
the
reread
teacher.
it. It said may not tell the parents. Was
They,
in there.
right. They are allowed to not tell them.
Oh. Okay, well, I guess that's a semantic thing. Isn't
But
it?
that is the
Because-
way, my understanding is that is the way that it is intended. The
That they
teacher
don't
is not
have to tell.
required to tell the parent.
Okay. Well, if it is that way, that's fine. But I guess then my question would be, would you go so far as to say that the teachers are not allowed to tell the parents? As a hypothetical.
That you're saying that the teachers are required to keep it secret?
Right.
I don't think that is the intention, and I don't think that's the way it's worded, to be honest with you. The idea is that it is not the teacher's responsibility to out the child.
Right.
If the child is not comfortable with their parents knowing their situation, there's a reason for that. And it may be because the child feels that they will be thrown out of the house.
Right.
That's usually the case,
Mhm.
that they're afraid for their parents to know.
Mhm.
And they may be more comfortable confiding in a teacher that they trust.
Mhm.
Another case sometimes is that the child is practicing with the teacher. They want to tell their parents, but they want to kind of practice having that dialogue first.
Right.
And it's not the teacher's responsibility to then go and tell the parents. They need to, if the teacher has a good relationship with the student,
Yeah.
and the student would only confide in the teacher if there is a good relationship, then in most cases, as I understand it, teachers encourage the child to share this information with their parents unless they feel that they will be in danger if they do.
Sure. Yeah,
So the
makes sense.
teachers are pretty much that in between place where the child who may be afraid of the parents or may just not be comfortable with the parents have a trusted adult that they can discuss this with instead of holding it all in and dealing with the emotional tumult that comes with having such a big issue that you're dealing with internally and unable to communicate to others. So I believe that you want to continue to let teachers build trust with children,
Yeah.
and then help the child to move forward in the way that is best for that child, given each child's situation is different. And there are so many trans people that when they come out to the parents, get thrown out of the house.
Is this only trans?
Yes, the
It's like the whole
5-7.
community?
The that particular part, the 5-7-5-6, is that what it is? 5-7-5-6 has to do with how the schools, it regulates what the schools can and cannot do as far as protecting trans children.
Okay.
And a lot of schools, it's a state regulation, and a lot of schools are trying to what do you call it? Overturn it at the school level.
Yeah.
You know, it's mandated by the state, but some schools are saying we're not going to abide by it. And what ends up happening is that schools that choose not to abide by it end up being sued. So the schools, they incur a whole lot of litigation costs, and eventually they're going to lose anyway. Where it has to be fought is at the state level. If you want to get rid of it, you have to change the law. You can't just at the school level decide.
That's actually part of what happened. So, kind of like when we were talking about the reproductive rights policy, sometimes the way the policy's written is what throws someone like me off. It's like, okay, people say things all the time, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to read the actual policy, da, da, da. And so, a lot of what was written in the policy wasn't clear to me what it actually meant. And so when I suggested that at the school board meeting, like, could you just rewrite the policy to make it clearer? Right, that's what the school lawyer said. And so, just as somebody who's like surface level involved, like myself, it turns into people are talking about just stuff about an issue. I try to get involved. I read the literature. I make a comment at the school board level, and then the school board basically says we can't do anything about it. And I'm just like, well, what? And that's why having these kinds of conversations is better, because it's like, well, then who can just make the language clearer in the bill? And that way it doesn't confuse people.
That would be
The state.
the state. And my biggest problem with all these school boards trying to overturn it is the message that it's sending to the trans community, which again is a small community but a very vulnerable community. And when the school was saying we don't want to enforce protections for the trans community, that makes the trans community feel even more vulnerable.
Right.
So even though the schools can't really override it, by even saying that they want to, they're causing more harm.
Right.
And the idea is really, like, trans children are not just like coming to school and, you know, changing their gender or anything like that. It's that they are sometimes confiding in someone at the school, and that person is not obligated to go run and tell the parents.
Right.
That's basically what it boils down to.
I got you.
But people are trying to make it seem as though, you know, teachers are keeping secrets from parents, and parents are, you know, being kept in the dark. Parents should have open discussions with their children.
Sure.
A parent who has a child and they have no idea that this is happening with
Right.
their child, that's a very uninformed parent, or, you know, something's wrong at that home. You know, you would think that a parent,
They would be having open dialogue, and you would know what's going on
they
with
should
the
be,
child.
or they should
Yeah.
make it clear to their child that whatever you are or however you feel, you can share it with me. But those children know that their parents are not going to be accepting, and that's why they're not communicating with them. So for other parents to say, I want the school to be forced to go and out this child, it's just wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's the decision of the child. But like, we often think like high school students and whatever, they're like, you know, we treat them as if they're property and not people. Like, I felt that as a child, you know, living with divorced parents and being trucked back and forth between states. I felt like a piece of property, not a person. And this isn't just the trans community, it's the same with like me. Like, I discovered who I was maybe when I was like 16 or 17, and people would tell me who I was before I even knew who I was,
Right.
which is crazy. But like, you can't even buy cough syrup under 18
Right.
in the state of New Jersey. So
Well, here's where I go with that. Because there's a lot of pressure on parents to raise the kid correctly, right? And if they feel like they don't know what's going on with the kid, then they could get punished for having done something incorrect. Is that
Parents could get punished?
yeah, like
By who?
DIFUS and da. And generally speaking, it's like we're telling parents how to raise their kids too. No matter how you
Just
look
that
at
they
it.
can't, like, beat them.
right, right.
Yeah,
I'm
and
just
that's
saying
fair.
there is
Yeah.
this general, I don't know, maybe I'm always paranoid or
I
something,
just
but
think that's a personal decision.
yeah.
Like, you never, like, let me just say, like, word of mouth, like, never out anyone, especially if someone's still discovering their identity, because that's, like, it's hard. And, like, for me, especially when I did come out, I was the only openly gay student at Lower Cape May Regional High School. I was the class of 2016, it was 2015, it was before the decision came out to make, like, same-sex marriage the law of the land. I was bold. It was hard. I got ridiculed for it.
Sure.
And there are a bunch of people who weren't as brave as me, who were scared and whatever. Like, that's their thing. Like, that's their decision, who they choose to tell or when they choose. Or they might never choose to. There are some people who just, you know, think about it once and then live a different
it's
life.
my personal decision. That's what
Right.
Yeah, and I'm grateful that I had a family that was very, like, accepting. Even, like, my mom was a little bit too much accepting. She was just ready. She's like, I knew since you were 2. But, like, I don't know, like, when you do that and you create the scripts, it's just, like, just it's an individual choice. Like, let them say it when they want to. Like, mental health stuff is a different subject. So, like, if it's a mental health problem and, you know, you have people, like, being, like, students being depressed, like, handle it as that, but don't
Yeah, if
go
it's a
after-
health issue.
Yeah, don't go after
Mm.
a student that's not right. Like,
No,
that
yeah.
decision is theirs. And like I said, they're not transitioning without their parents. That's, like, not a thing.
It's not happening.
No. Like,
Well, that's the way it's written, though, and that's, you know, maybe I'm just
but you
obsessive
can't
about
get
the way
medical
things are
help
written.
as a minor. You can't, like, do anything medically without your parents.
And teachers aren't doing that with students.
No. Like I said, the cough syrup. When I was 17 and my mom was like, whatever, she was on vacation or something, I couldn't get cough syrup.
Yeah.
So they're not
Yeah,
getting
it's weird.
procedures without their parents. It's just an identity. They're discovering themselves. Let them decide who they want to be.
Sure. We did that. I mean, I guess there's one final thing. You guys know about SALT deduction caps and all that?
Yeah,
State and local
yeah.
taxes. What's your general...
We need to have it back. We need to be able to deduct.
Well, I guess for the people who are not fully informed on what it is, could you give an explanation?
SALT is state and local tax.
Yep.
Right? State and local tax. It has to do with if you have properties and you're allowed to deduct from your taxes the amount that you paid in property taxes from your tax returns, right?
I believe so.
And I think the tax laws that got changed during Trump's first administration, he was trying to hurt some of the northeastern states, and he removed or he decreased the amount that you could deduct on your state and local taxes on the federal form, because if you can't deduct it, then you end up paying more. So he changed that. And people were up in arms because they need those tax deductions in order to keep the federal income taxes down. So we need to restore that so people can take those deductions and not have to pay as much as they are now. We need to set it back to where it was prior to the tax laws, the tax code that was changed, but that was by the federal government. So I'm not sure what we can do about that at the state level, but we do need it fixed at the federal level. We need it to go back to what it used to be.
Sure. You have anything to add to that?
No,
Okay.
not really.
Cool. Yeah, we just did like a little marathon there.
Yeah.
But was there anything that we forgot? Anything particular you guys want to say?
Well, we're talking about taxes. You want to talk about the New Jersey, the idea that we have about setting up a trust for the federal taxes to go into?
Maybe not today.
Not today?
Not
Okay,
today.
we'll talk about that at a different time.
Sure.
We're looking for ways to protect New Jersey residents from some of the ill-begotten effects of the Trump Doge cuts. Some of the cuts that may be made to federal funds that used to come to help our citizens, if they're not coming because they're being cut from the federal government and our tax dollars used to fund them, then how are we going to pay for them? So Brandon and I were thinking of ways that we could possibly craft legislation that would give us a way to deal with the ill effects of some of the federal cuts that we see coming over the next few years.
Yeah, I think it might not be the same thing, but it sounds similar. There's something going on with the current legislation where they're setting aside money and putting in trusts, getting the banking system of New Jersey to sort of set aside funds to shore up against what's happening.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
I'll review my notes.
Yeah, there may be other efforts. We had some of just brainstormed a little bit, but not enough to like have a fully flushed out piece of legislation.
Sure.
But yeah, we need to look at ways to make ourselves more protected. So if there's something in the works, that's good. If not, we'll come up with something.
Yeah, cool.
One thing I do want to end with and reiterate is that Carolyn and I were not, politicians like, your
Career
Norcross
politicians.
machine.
Yeah.
We're normal people, normal citizens fighting for our community. So we're fighting for a lot of things, but we don't claim to know everything. We don't know everyone's situation or everyone's struggle. But the biggest thing in our campaign is we are opening to listening. We listen. We'll listen to anyone. You have a story, come to me, get my number, tell me it. We're willing to work, listen, and compromise. And I think that's what's going to set us aside in this race.
Hey, I'll say first, you guys definitely earned a lot of points with me today.
Wonderful.
And I know I'm just like one guy from Cumberland County or whatever, but it says a lot. Like I said earlier, some of the local guys literally live a 2-minute drive up the street from their house. How hard would it be to schedule a 30-minute interview at Starbucks or something?
Yeah.
And just help get the message out.
Transparency is one of the things that both of us are very big on. Transparency in governing and transparency in campaigning.
Yeah.
One story that I wanted to tell in closing was about we've both been applying for different endorsements, and one of the groups that we were looking for an endorsement from they actually bring you in for an interview just to make sure that you're the right kind of candidate for them. One of the questions that was asked was, or at least asked of me, if you are in the assembly and there's a vote needed on some piece of legislation and you really don't like it, but the assembly lead comes to you and says, we need your vote on this, we need you to vote yes, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I am not going to vote yes on something that I don't agree with, so I would vote no. And then the next question was, okay, what if they tell you that if you vote no, then the next time there's a question about funding schools in Cumberland County, we're not going to fund them unless you give us a yes vote. then would you vote yes?
Mafia.
Exactly. And I said, wait a minute, they wouldn't do that, would they?
Of course they do.
And
Well,
they said-
I don't know. I don't know.
Then you know.
I know.
It sounds
But
plausible.
yes, exactly. And the person that was asking me the question said, of course they're going to do that. That's the way it works. So it's disgusting to know that that's the way it works. But then the question was still for me to answer, what would you do? So I said, and this is maybe me being naive, but I said I would still vote no,
Right.
but that I would go to the press. And I would make sure that,
Sure.
that the
And I would
public
appreciate that.
knows, exactly, that the public knows what's going on. Now, in doing so, I may make it so that I never get elected again, but I'd rather vote my conscience and vote for what is best for the people that are my constituents than vote the way the party wants me to just because the party is the boss.
You mean you're going to act in accordance with what's supposed to happen?
That's what I mean. So that's why I wanted to close with that little story.
You know, I know we're hitting a closing tone, but maybe we can touch on this quickly. I know you and I talked about some of this at the meet and greet. Part of me banging my head against the wall with this for the past 2 years has made me realize there might be smarter ways to work with trying to accomplish what I want to do. And so I have like 3 quick things that we can just talk about. First thing is local civics education in schools.
Yes.
It's needed.
Right. I feel like when I'm talking to people, and I include myself in this bucket, I don't even know how local government works. So what business do I have voting for when I don't even understand how the system? Like, I know it's my right. I know I'm going to continue to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But what I'm saying is, wouldn't my vote be more powerful and my voice be more powerful if not only I, but the entire community actually knew
Understood
what
the
was going on?
process. Yeah. So, yeah, I would propose legislation that would reintroduce the American government civics requirement to graduate. They make us take a biology test, and we never get the results of the test. It doesn't affect how we graduate, but there's no civics requirement. I graduated from Lower Cape May Regional High School. I didn't know what Congress was. I
Like
didn't know
US
anything.
Congress.
Yes,
Yeah.
I didn't know anything but the presidency. And it wasn't until I started studying in school in Florida, I was at community college, and we had to take an American government course. Like, I don't feel like taking an American government course, but it was my favorite course I've ever taken in college. Because I learned about our institutions. I think it should be a requirement that American citizens know American government.
Right.
If you're voting, you should know exactly what you're voting for. And then, so we should make that a requirement and have a test. And we should incorporate local politics into it. We're New Jersey. We can make a state standard, state standard course, a state standard
Municipal
test.
level standard,
Oh,
county
yeah.
level standard, whatever.
Oh, yeah. I fully support that, and if I get into the legislature, I will be the one to propose it.
Cool. Second idea, or did you want to add to that?
No, again.
Second idea would that
I
be
agree.
doing what I'm doing, but just make it a state mandate, as in the county clerk or whoever, I assume it would be her, would just give you a standard questionnaire that's comprehensive, and you know it's coming, so you just write your platform down and they share it, and then they offer basic services like a podcast interview. It's not biased, it's just we do a standard interview process so people know who you are, get your face out there, and then schedule a couple of town halls, a couple of debates, meet and greets, whatever. So it's just standardized.
Yeah.
I would actually love that if somebody, because that's actually helping us get our message out. So
Right.
that would be wonderful, but I don't know, how do you mandate that? Are you saying regulate that the county clerk has to do this for every candidate that wants to
As
run?
an opportunity.
As an opportunity,
So,
okay, so
right,
offer it.
one of the pushbacks I've gotten from this is we don't want to micromanage anybody's campaign. It's like, okay,
Right.
offer it as a free service. You don't have to participate. And then we just write down, chose not to fill out the questionnaire or chose not to show up to the debate.
I'm a little more extreme on this idea. I want a nonpartisan commission to have a public platform for all candidates. I think that it gets money out of politics, especially dark money. Get the dark money out of politics.
That wouldn't get the money out. Okay.
But
it would be a step in the right direction.
It's a step in the right direction because the candidates that are like better candidates but not as wealthy would still have the same chances of getting their message out. So some type of public channel where all candidates have access to putting their platform on at their discretion. A public mailer that goes out once an election. That all candidates have the opportunity to put their voice on. That educates the public on who these candidates are. Maybe put their website link on it. It would be easier for people to do their research if they knew where to look. I would definitely support that.
Sure.
There are a lot of opportunities already that exist for that. You and I have discussed this. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization, and every candidate is always asked to fill out their form. Now, maybe you're talking about be given the opportunity to do an interview or to submit videos or whatever that would then, there would be some portal through which they could be shared. But for just, at the level of gathering information, they do. League of Women Voters, Ballotpedia, there's so many different organizations that give candidates an opportunity to give them information that is then made available to everyone. But the problem is exactly what you said. Only some candidates take people up on that offer. So, I know that last year I ran in the congressional race. Brandon did as well, but he dropped out because of his mom's health issues. But there were 3 candidates running in the same primary as me. We each got requested by the League of Women Voters to fill out this questionnaire. I went through and filled the whole thing out. It took a long time because there were a lot of questions and I wanted to be as thorough as possible. The other candidates never did. So if anybody wanted to do a comparison and they went to the League of Women Voters, which is a national organization that has existed forever, right? You would, it's a trusted source. You could go there, but the only candidate that you would find information out is about me, and then you can't do any comparison.
I think
so.
The problem there is the awareness. Finding it,
it's going to be with
it should
anything.
be well-known thing in a functioning democracy is what I would say.
So maybe before the ballots go out, maybe something else goes out.
Send it along with this.
That's exactly what I was saying.
I want to
put the link to the website here.
I want to take the burden off of the citizens having to find the information.
Why am I spending 2 years
if it's sent
looking for
directly
information
to them in the mail?
So then this becomes you're not saying on the actual
Not
ballot.
on it, just send it with it. If they're already sending this out,
there's
just
an
have a
extra
slip
piece of
in there
paper
with
in it.
information about the candidates. All the candidates.
Information that the candidates provide? Yep. Like a written, like a little bio about each candidate?
There's a
with their links, QR
somebody that
codes or
the
whatever?
county clerk appoints to just gather the information, consolidate it, and this is what people
I
volunteer.
like the idea, but it's going to be hard to implement.
Sure.
I think. It's going to be costly, and it's going to be
A lot of pushback.
not without, not at pushback and not without lawsuits.
Yeah.
Somebody's not going to like what, if you have some third party putting it together, somebody's not going to like what was put together on their behalf, and they're going to, sue that it was, created an unfair advantage.
The reason why I don't let it go, I understand where you're coming from, is we the people, right? We want to know who the candidates are. I don't understand how.
I think sharing, some sort of document that would share links to where the candidates have put their own information would be ideal.
Sure.
Because that's what we like to distribute anyway. We have campaign literature. We always have a QR code so people can go to our site and get more information about us. So that would be a good thing to include. But yeah, I don't disagree that it would be great to get information shared with everybody so there's a level playing field and everybody has the opportunity to learn more about who their choices are.
Sure. And then the third thing, this is harder to know exactly how to implement, but basically not just freedom of the press, but a mandatory minimum of press. As right now here in Cumberland County, we're considered an information desert. And I think I brought
You
this
mean
up.
printed press?
Just the idea of,
News.
is there anybody walking around asking basic questions so that the public knows what's going on?
Like what you're doing. Is
Either
there
what
anybody
I'm doing,
other than
or
you doing what you're doing?
there was a thing in Cedarville where a new company bought some land and put up a pool making company, like above ground pools or whatever it is. And everybody lost their minds with on social media, like, oh my god, who is this company? And they're doing work in the middle of the night, blah blah blah. And then we go to the meeting, and it just seems like everything's on the up and up. You know what I mean? And everybody's losing their mind.
You go to like a commissioners meeting or a town council. Is that what you mean?
At a town council meeting.
Yeah.
Right, and, there's 100 people in the room, everybody's asking questions, and it just looks like this guy opened a business and he's just doing everything by the book, but because social media went out of control. But nobody was just asking or showing up to the planning board meetings to just...
It's tough to get people to either take interest in the planning board meetings or find the time to go.
Sure.
So
But that's what I mean, if we had press that we could count on, because obviously right now we can't necessarily count on it. Some kind of solution.
And there's so little trust in the press anymore.
Right.
It's going to make it even a harder thing to fix. I understand what you're saying.
It's difficult.
Right, like
There's-
half the things that maybe you and I would have disagreed with earlier today were cleared up because we just sat down and somebody asked you a couple of questions.
Yeah. Like what I
Yeah,
could
mind
do,
blown.
like Harold could sit down with us and do a little thing. They do it with some of the successful candidates, but none of the people trying to make change. But you can't force them to do stuff they don't want to do. So, I mean, we could just hope, put pressure on them publicly. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it's unfortunate.
that's where mine is.
We
my
got to
mind
clone
is.
you. Have a whole bunch of you running around
I guess.
Cumberland County
Or
and
just
asking
make it
questions.
status quo expectation. We teach our citizens about how the government actually works. We try to get the information about what's going on with elections out to candidate or citizens, and we have some people walking around town asking questions to make sure.
No.
Could I just say
An
one more
ideal
thing?
world.
You could prop it in the front or something.
Yeah.
The General Assembly, for people who don't know, is New Jersey's state house.
Exactly.
So whatever is not signed by the federal government, the Assembly and the Senate in New Jersey decide. So they write the laws. The governor signs them into law, but the Assembly can override a governor's veto. So the Assembly writes the laws in New Jersey. So I think they're very, very important, and it's very good to know who your legislators are and what they're doing.
I'll piggyback on that, and Senator Testa will appreciate this. The state senators work in Trenton, and they make legislation for New Jersey. They do not hang out in Washington, or at least not regularly.
That is a true statement.
Yes, it is.
Both the senators and the assemblymen and assemblywomen work in Trenton, which is our state capital.
Right.
There are 40 state senators, 80 assembly people.
One
So-
senator per district, 2 assemblymen
Right.
per district.
And there are 40 legislative districts in the state of New Jersey.
Yes.
So
And we are LD1. We're the first one.
we're
Bottom of the
number
map.
one.
Yes, we are. Okay, just
Well,
wanted
anyway.
to clarify that. Well, thank you so much.
No,
Yes.
thank you.
It
I
was
very much
Absolutely
appreciate
a
it.
pleasure.
Yeah. Good
Lots
luck.
of good questions.
Yeah, good
Lots
luck
of
with
good
the
discussion.
campaign. It sounds
Thank
like
you.
you guys are fighting for some good causes and stuff, so and hopefully people will pay attention and
Yeah,
make the right choice, at least for them.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. An informed decision is always a good decision.
Yes, exactly.
It's a better chance of being a good one. So.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.